Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Jason Dell with Network Solutions. I'm a network security engineer, and the topic for this segment is cybersecurity for the real world. So that's a broad topic. I have a lot of things to cover. I'm only going to be scratching the surface, and I'm going to be whizzing through these slides pretty quickly. We'll talk about me for a moment, and then we'll talk about security justification. We'll put up a sample network topology, a sample security topology. What's the justification for security? It's sometimes very expensive and a daunting task and hard to understand. But what we're doing is protecting our data assets. These data assets are very important. What happens if they're compromised? What happens if the critical information in your company is compromised, is damaged, is stolen, or otherwise compromised? What are the repercussions to that? Now we're talking about customer information, potentially employee information. Maybe you make a certain product or a service and you do it better than all your competitors, or maybe you don't have any competitors. If that were to get out, what would the impact be to your company? Can you put a dollar value on your data, on the security of that data? And if it's compromised, what's going to be the impact of that? Who's going to take the fall for that? Someone will be held accountable. And look in the news, they always call somebody out whenever one of these big companies is compromised. But the industrialization of hacking has changed over the years. And you can see that it's changed. It started out being mostly viruses. And as of late, it's been more focused on advanced persistent threats. Now, an advanced persistent threat, or an APT, is a targeted attack on your company, crafted just to go through your defenses. It's not meant to be downloaded from the web, an email. It's a crafted attack to try to get in. So there's a much more difficult than your run-of-the-mill viruses and intrusion attempts to get through. What do we do about it? Well, so to break it down to the very basics, security is visibility and control. You can't control what you can't see. So you need to have visibility to your network. Now, most people know the network appliances or network devices that are attached to their network, the hosts, the endpoints. The company assigned laptops, the servers, the PCs, some of the mobile devices that are attached to their network, and that's all good and fine. But what about the network traffic that goes across your network? How do you know what's going on there and what is normal? When there's a surge of network activity in a particular part of your network, how can you identify what it is, and how can you tell whether it's malicious or not? Right, so what I'm going to start with here, without going too much into the weeds, I promise, is a basic network topology. So in this basic network topology, we got a data center, one or more offices, one or more branches. I suppose you could have one or more data centers as well, remote access users, and some business partners. Pretty typical for most companies. Okay? We're going to overlay that with a security topology, a basic security topology, which is what most people have, wherever you can install it. Wherever you can install it, I can say, is wherever it's able to be installed. Because there are some devices that it's not compatible with. That doesn't mean that those devices are not susceptible to malware. That just means you can't install anti-malware software on that endpoint. As well, your business, a lot of server applications, let's say that your critical business application is running on a server, and the vendor, it's a 10-year-old product, it's been there, but it's the blood of your company. You need it to survive. And it's what keeps your company going. But it's a little bit archaic, and they won't allow you to do any real-time virus scanning on that. Everyone's familiar with that, right? You have to exclude these certain traffics from your antivirus. Maybe you have to exclude it from real-time protection altogether, or you might have to uninstall it and depend on the surrounding security technologies to protect it. Well, if you're excluding real-time protection from your critical servers, you're excluding real-time protection from your servers. So what does that mean? You can't just say, well, that's the way it is and move along. That's important, right? So these people think they've done their due diligence with this particular topology. Let's overlay onto that now some of the potential vulnerabilities. Now, I know that is one ugly slide. It's got a lot of things going on. And I'm probably going to spend the most amount of time picking this slide apart, so we'll stay here for a short time. But let's talk about the weaknesses, the unchecked threats that are coming through the system. Right? First of all, we discussed malware. We discussed where it isn't installed. Let's say that server that doesn't have malware protection installed fully is your critical business application server. What's the impact of that getting compromised? As well, your endpoints. Let's say most of your today's endpoint antivirus software is point in time, meaning if a file comes to that endpoint, it looks to see if it can match it with a known list of malware, and there's two possible dispositions. It either is malware or they don't know what it is. So If it is malware, they can stop it right then. If it is not malware, they don't know whether it's, they don't know what it is. It could be, but they have to let it pass because that's the default. How else could you do it, right? But let's say that today's malware is a lot more complex, where it can polymorph and spawn different files. So let's say you've downloaded file A, and it is not known malware, but it later on renames itself to file B and file C, and then it spawns files D, E, and F, and F is very malicious. How did F get there? How can you tell the source of that file? How do you know what all was involved in that? How did it get on your network? And by the way, since it's past your point of time antivirus software, it's already on there, it's done its damage, it's already propagated throughout your network. Right, so you need to have an antivirus software that can really track every file in your system. It is completely possible to track every file that's going through your system, or as much as you can wherever you have the proper endpoint protection installed. That way you can get a history of where this file came from and what it's been doing to the endpoints that it's on. Right, so there's no ability really to contain either. So if a branch is compromised and you have malware throughout this particular branch has gotten on one or two systems, what's to keep it from spreading? What's the containment mechanism in this case for that particular situation? If the malware is in a branch, even if somebody came in and got on your network who wasn't supposed to be in, and they've gotten connected to your network somehow, what's to stop the propagation of malware to go directly down to your data center and compromise your critical data app or steal your critical data? Is there anything in place there after that endpoint that will check that traffic for malware or for other malicious traffic? Okay, so if there's no way to contain, there's no way to stop it, right? There's just ways around that. As well, let's talk about in-transit traffic. First, we'll start with the WAN, the MPLS. How secure is that between points in an MPLS network? Your carrier tells you, it's secure, it's point to point. It's private. But are you going to trust that security with your MPLS provider? Or shouldn't you be owning that security yourself and being accountable and responsible? And so encrypting that traffic to make sure that it's secure as it traverses the MPLS network. Okay, if you are a company that uses personal cardholder information, if you're a bank or a retailer and you take credit cards, PCI requires that all that traffic is encrypted end to end. So you can't just go across MPLS, say, oh, it's okay because my provider says that it's private. That's not necessarily the case. You need to own that, and you need to be accountable and responsible for that data. So, as well, what's to keep a man in the middle from hopping in on the side of that MPLS network, watching all that traffic that's going across clear text, intercepting it, and intruding, getting in on your network, and doing some tests to try to find vulnerabilities? There's nothing really there. Okay, so this seems like a big task to get rid of all these little, these little points here. Let's talk about what do we do about it. Okay, so this is many of you have probably seen this. This is a piece of the Cisco attack continuum, before, during, and after model. And what it basically says is, don't just look at point in time of what's going on right now. That's important, and don't just look at prevention, because of course that's important. But look at it end to end. How do you prevent it? How do you catch it in the act? And what do you do about it when it gets through your defenses? Because no security is foolproof. It doesn't matter how much you spend. No security is foolproof. There's still going to be a way through there some way. And when it does, what do you do about it? Right? You can only mitigate threats. You can't eliminate the threats. Right? So that after, of course, can take that information. And what this means at the little arrows on here is ideally it pass contextual information, security information, between those layers. So what's learned in during can be passed on to before, and what's learned in after could be passed on before. So they can perhaps adjust those policies and those security measures to prevent any further attacks. And it goes across all your endpoints, your network, your mobile, virtual, your data center, the cloud. Don't leave any pieces out of there, and it's only as effective as it is thorough, end-to-end security. So here's another model from Cisco, and it's really, again, it's such a daunting task to think about, your entire network. You could have hundreds or thousands of nodes, several pieces of network appliances. How do you protect it all? How do you take it all in? Well, the best thing to do, you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So take your network and you divide it into smaller, manageable sections. We'll call these sections places in the network, or pins. Then for each pin you've defined, you just apply your security methodologies to each of those pins, so as a unit they are completely secure. Make sure these pins can talk to each other, can pass information, contextual information to each other. So there's a security system and not island security that can be going around. All right, so if we took our previous network topology and we divided it into pins, this is what it looked like. Your data center, your business partners, your branches, your offices, your remote access users. And put your network and your internet in the as well. They're separately from those. Okay, let's deep dive into one of those and see what we can do about it. Okay, we'll start with the internet. You know, the big one, the one where all the threats come from. Now, when we say the internet, we're not just talking about the connecting point from your data center to the internet service provider. We're talking about anywhere that has access to the internet. So recall your offices and your branches had a DMVPN network. Well, they have direct access to the network, right? Why shouldn't they have the same protection that you'd have at your data center? It has access to the network. You say, well, I got a firewall there, I'm only letting secure protocols through. It's still direct connectivity to the internet. It's something that can be compromised and it's something to be considered. You don't want a back door that's a screen door, right? You want your back door to be as strong as your front door, okay? So the first thing you do with any PAN is you identify your risks. In this case, for the internet, you know, we're already in our example security topology. They already had a firewall. Make sure it's a next generation firewall. What do I mean by that? Your legacy firewalls were really only stateful firewalls. They permitted nothing except the protocols that you allowed it to permit, and that's really pretty much it. Okay, it doesn't go any deeper than that. Your next generation technologies, next generation firewalls, look a little deeper than that. They still do the same stateful firewall functions, but they also do deep packet inspection and application visibility, so you can control those applications and have more visibility to the traffic that's going across those permitted rules. Okay, your web security, you know, it might end up being, in this case, web security is just an appliance that sits in your data center and you force all of your web traffic to go through there. If that works for you, you know, fine. But perhaps it might be better to consider a distributed web security methodology to where users don't all have to go to your network. If anything, for performance and efficiency, but something you can share the same policies across on all these web security solutions. Email security. Now, web and email security are the top two threat vectors. They always have been. And they're going to continue to be that way for a while. So make sure your email security system and your web security system have the maximum efficiency as possible, the maximum efficacy as possible. Okay? So if you have web security and you're blocking categories, okay, and you're looking for viruses, that's all good and fine, but what happens when it's encrypted traffic? Okay, unless your email security, your web security solution rather, can do in the middle decryption and inspection, then malware or intrusions can happen right through, you know, a secure socket. You won't even know about it, right? We talked about malware protection. Security intelligence is, you know, think about your virus definitions you've downloaded, but a lot more. Live security intelligence to give you the information to up to the minute security information. Okay, so what that'll do is that'll mitigate your zero-day threats. It will not eliminate your zero-day threats, but it'll at least reduce the time to come closer to zero-day, you know, mitigation of those, or remediation. Okay. Always at the bottom of each of these pins, or included in each of these pins, you're going to have past contextual data. It's important that the information learned from this pin is shared through all the other pins in your network. Okay. Your branch and office has something completely different than in data centers, because now we're talking about endpoints. Endpoints are on your network, and you want to have endpoint visibility. Okay, what kind of traffic is passing through your endpoints? What you can see, what you have visibility to, you can control. Access to the data infrastructure, identity services. You know, who are you before you have access to the network infrastructure? And by access to the network infrastructure, I mean physical access, wireless access, or VPN access to the network infrastructure. Okay, you need to be able to decide whether they're permitted on your network before they connect to your network, and not just allow them on and then look for threats. Okay, what kind of machine are they running? Do some posture assessment. Are they up to your policy standards before they're connected to your network? And oh, by the way, if that integrates with your other security systems, if that posture changes down the road, you can then change their connectivity method to maybe pop them into a remediation area where they can get themselves, let's say they get malware, where they can get themselves cleaned up and back before they get back on your production network. Security intelligence and contextual data sharing, just like the other one. Data center, identify your risks. This is going to look sort of like the slide we just saw, except there's not going to be as much access because they're servers, right? They're always on your network, they're in a secure network, but a lot of the same things. You still want endpoint visibility. Let's not forget, you still want to know what traffic goes across these servers, these data servers. Okay, so if you can see it, you can protect it. Okay. Wide area network. Remember, we're putting that in a pin of its own. Okay, so we can analyze what's going on there and the threats that are there. We can identify those risks. Segmentation is important, right? So if you segment your traffic, you can contain it. Okay, network traffic visibility. Remember we talked about before, if say a branch gets compromised, what's to keep that traffic from going right to the data center? They have traffic, if you have visibility on your network infrastructure, you can catch it in transit and stop it. The best way to do it, contain it. Okay. VPN, always encourage wherever possible. And as long as you keep up with the, any sort of vulnerabilities that come out with today's VPN technologies. Contextual data sharing. Business partners, what can you do in there? Nothing. That's their network. You don't really have anything to it except how they connect to your network. And they're going to connect to your network through the wide area network pin or through the internet pin. So if you keep those secure, you're keeping them secure. Just have visibility. One thing I can say is access control to add to this. Just because they're your business partner, you don't need to give them carte blanche access to your whole network. They probably only need to have access to 1 or 2 servers. And really probably only HTTPS or maybe a few other protocols. Just allow them the protocols they need and only to the servers that they need to have access to. And if you can get even more granular than that, it'd be great if you could turn on and off that access as needed. That's not always feasible, but you try to do your best with that. All right, so before, during, and after, the safe security model, defense in depth, segmentation, and the security system needs to work as a system together. It needs to work so they can talk to each other and communicate with each other and pass contextual information to each other. It's completely possible for that to happen, so your security system works end-to-end as a security system, not just islands of security. Okay, utilize security intelligence at all levels wherever possible so you can stop it. And containment, let's talk about containment real quick. So let's say that a country somewhere in the world has a bad pandemic, right? A human pandemic. What's the first thing they do when they declare it's going to be a pandemic or it is a pandemic? Is they will scope it, right? What's the scope? Where is it gone? Is it this geographic area? Is it anywhere else? They're going to contain it. They're going to say, okay, no one goes in or out of this area. And then they're going to remediate it. They're going to try to fix the problem that's there before they have access to the rest of the world. So that's important. You need to have that ability within your own network to contain things as quickly as possible and remediate them. And then security intelligence, like I said, is just get you closer to your day zero threats. Any questions? Yes. Patch them.
As an intrusion protection system, you have to be able to recognize signatures and want to catch, any issue, or is only patch going to fix the problem?
Great question. So the question was, for these latest Ike vulnerabilities, is it sufficient to put an intrusion prevention system in place, or will it catch it? It may, but always patch your systems whenever something of high critical, so it's I'm sorry, it's an obvious answer, but always patch your systems because it may, but it may not. And if you have an IPS system that utilizes security intelligence, it might catch it quicker. As something comes out, as it happens, as quickly as possible. But that does not mean don't patch it. Definitely with something, whenever you go to, say, Cisco site, and you see the big red circle, schedule it as soon as feasible, as soon as possible. Yeah. Thanks for that question.